He thought he was the apex predator. He thought the badge on his chest gave him the right to decide who belonged and who didn't. Officer Brad Stryker saw a black man sitting on the porch of $1 million colonial in an exclusive Virginia suburb, and saw only one thing a suspect. He didn't see the years of sacrifice, the classified clearance, or the gun on the man's hip that was legal in all 50 states. He didn't know that he wasn't just harassing a civilian. He was picking a fight with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. By the time the sun set that evening, Stryker wouldn't just lose his job. He would lose his pension, his freedom, and his very name. This is the story of how arrogance met a brick wall, and how the hardest karma of all is the truth. The humid Virginia air clung to the manicured lawns of Oak Creek like a warm blanket. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon, the kind of time when the golden hour hits the white picket fences and makes everything look like a scene from a movie about the American dream. For Darius Miller, this was the first moment of peace he had found in 3 months. Darius sat on the wraparound porch of his colonial-style home, a glass of iced tea sweating on the wicker table beside him. He was 42, though the grey flecks in his beard suggested a man who had seen more than his years allowed. He wore a faded navy blue t-shirt and grey sweatpants, his bare feet resting on the cool wood of the decking. To anyone passing by, he looked like a guy who had maybe taken a sick day, or perhaps a contractor taking a break. But Darius wasn't a contractor, and he wasn't sick. He was Special Agent in Charge, SAC, of the Counter-Terrorism Division, currently on mandatory leave after a high-stakes extraction in Beirut that had gone sideways before going right. He had spent the last week debriefing with the director and filling out enough paperwork to decimate a small forest. Today was day 1 of decompression. He took a sip of the tea. Unsweetened, watching a squirrel navigate the oak tree in the front yard. He loved this house. He and his wife, Sarah, a corporate attorney currently in D.C. for a merger, had bought it 3 years ago. It was their sanctuary. They were one of the few black families in Oak Creek, a fact that hadn't gone unnoticed. But for the most part, the neighbors were polite, if somewhat distant. Darius closed his eyes, listening to the distant hum of a lawn-mower. Then, a different sound cut through the suburban idyllics, the low, aggressive growl of a Ford Explorer Interceptor engine. Darius didn't open his eyes immediately. He knew the sound. He'd spent half his life around law enforcement vehicles. He knew the specific idle of a police cruiser. He waited for it to pass. It didn't pass. The engine noise swelled, then dropped as the vehicle slowed to a crawl. The tires crunched softly on the asphalt. Darius opened his eyes. A black and white Oak Creek Police Department cruiser was creeping past his driveway. The window was down. Through the tint, Darius could see a silhouette. The driver was staring, not glancing, staring. Darius held the gaze. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just watched. He had done nothing wrong. He was sitting on his own property. There was no need to perform friendliness for a passing patrol car. The cruiser rolled past, the brake lights flashing red as it reached the stop sign at the corner. Darius exhaled, reaching for his tea again. Just a patrol, he told himself. Don't be paranoid. You're back in the States. You're home. But the cruiser didn't turn left toward the main road. It didn't turn right toward the precinct. It threw it into reverse. Darius set his glass down. The ice clinked against the sides. The only sound on the suddenly silent porch. He watched as the cruiser backed up, the transmission whining, until it was parked directly in front of his walkway. the engine cut off. Darius remained seated. He shifted his weight slightly, an instinctive check of his surroundings. His service weapon, a Glock 19M, was inside in the safe. He was unarmed, just a man in sweatpants. The door of the cruiser swung open. A boot hit the pavement, polished to a mirror shine. Out stepped Officer Brad Stryker. Stryker was the kind of cop who looked like he spent more time on his biceps than his case files. He was tall, thick-necked, with a buzz cut that was a week too fresh, and sunglasses that cost half a paycheck. He hitched up his utility belt, the leather creaking, and adjusted his body camera. He didn't look like a peacekeeper. He looked like a man looking for a punching bag. He stood by the hood of his car for a moment, scanning the property. He looked at the manicured lawn. He looked at the Audi Q7 in the driveway. Then he looked at Darius. Stryker didn't walk up the path immediately. He stood on the sidewalk, crossing his arms. It was a power move. He wanted Darius to come to him. He wanted the suspect to descend from the porch and offer supplication. Darius didn't move. He took another sip of tea. "Can I help you?" "Officer," Darius called out. His voice was calm, baritone, carrying easily across the 20 yards between them. Stryker tilted his head, as if surprised the scenery was speaking to him. He uncrossed his arms and rested his right hand near his holster, not on it, but close enough to send a message. He began to walk up the driveway. "You live here?" Stryker asked. No greeting, no "good afternoon." Just the interrogation. "I do," Darius said. He didn't stand up. He knew the psychology of this. If he stood up, it could be interpreted as aggression. If he stayed seated, it was passive. But Stryker would likely see sitting as disrespect. There was no winning. So Darius chose comfort. Stryker stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He was close now. Darius could see the nameplate on his chest. B. Stryker. He could smell the mix of gun oil and cheap cologne. "You sure about that?" Stryker asked, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked around the porch, eyeing the expensive patio furniture. "This is a nice house. Pricey neighborhood for, well, you know." Darius felt a familiar coldness settle in his stomach. It was the same coldness he felt when he was tracking a target in a crowd. The adrenaline spike, instantly suppressed by years of training. "For who, officer?" Darius asked, his voice flat. "Say what you mean." Stryker chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "For someone who looks like they should be mowing the lawn, not sitting on it." The air on the porch seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I own this home, Officer Stryker," Darius said, using the name to let the man know he was reading him. "Is there a reason you're trespassing on my property? Or are you just doing a census of the home owners you don't approve of?" Stryker's jaw tightened. The smirk vanished. He took a step up the first stair. "I've had reports." Stryker lied. It was smooth, practiced. "Reports of suspicious activity in the area. Break-ins, squatters." "Squatters," Darius repeated, "wearing patio furniture and drinking iced tea." "We've had reports of people casing houses," Stryker said, his voice rising, adopting the command presence tone taught in the academy but abused by bullies. "And you fit the description?" "What description is that?" Darius asked. "Black male, sitting." Stryker pointed a finger at Darius. "Watch your mouth. I'm conducting an investigation. I need to see some ID. Now." Darius sighed. He looked at the officer. Really looked at him. He saw the insecurity masked by the badge. He saw the hunger for conflict. He knew exactly where this was going. He had two choices: de-escalate by submitting, or stand his ground and let the man dig his own grave. Darius Miller had spent 20 years hunting terrorists who wanted to burn the world down. He wasn't about to be bullied on his own front porch by a patrolman with a Napoleonic complex. "My ID is inside," Darius said calmly. "And unless you have probable cause to believe I've committed a crime, I'm not required to show it to you. This is a consensual encounter, officer, and I am not consenting. Please leave my property." Stryker froze. It wasn't the refusal that stunned him. It was the vocabulary. Probable cause. Consensual encounter. Those were legal terms. Lawyers used them. Cops used them. Suspects usually just screamed or ran. Stryker's face turned a mottled shade of red. He unclipped the retention strap on his taser. "You're refusing a lawful order." Stryker barked. "It's not a lawful order," Darius corrected. "It's an unlawful demand based on racial profiling. You have no articulable suspicion that I am involved in criminal activity. I'm sitting on my porch." "I'm detaining you," Stryker snapped, stepping up onto the porch deck. The wood creaked under his heavy boots. "Stand up. Turn around. Hands behind your back." "For what?" Darius remained seated, his hands clearly visible on his knees. "What is the crime?" "Officer, failure to identify resisting an officer. Disorderly conduct." Stryker was listing charges like he was ordering off a menu. "Get up, or I will light you up." He drew the taser. The yellow plastic gun was pointed squarely at Darius's chest. The two red laser dots danced on his navy t-shirt. Darius didn't flinch. He looked at the taser, then up at Stryker's eyes. "Officer Stryker," Darius said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. "You are making a mistake, a career-ending mistake. I am going to ask you, one time, to holster that weapon and walk away." "Get on the ground!" Stryker screamed, his finger hovering over the trigger. Across the street, Mrs. Higgins, the neighborhood watch captain who usually spent her days peering through her blinds for HOA violations, pushed open her front door. She held her phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at them. The stage was set, and Brad Stryker was about to perform the final act of his career. Though he didn't know it yet, the silence of the neighborhood had shattered. Stryker's shouting echoed off the siding of the adjacent houses. "Get on the ground now." Darius Miller looked at the taser. He calculated the distance, 6 feet. If Stryker fired, the probes would hit. The neuromuscular incapacitation would lock Darius's body up for 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, Stryker would likely jump on him, potentially going for his service pistol or using percussive force baton or fists. Darius raised his hands slowly, palms open, fingers spread, the universal sign of surrender. But his eyes were not surrendering. They were recording. "I am complying with your physical commands under duress," Darius stated clearly, ensuring the body camera on Stryker's chest picked up every syllable. "I am not resisting. I am not fleeing. I am entering my home to retrieve my identification, as you requested." "I didn't say go inside," Stryker yelled, stepping closer, the taser still trained on Darius's center mass. "I said get on the ground. You're under arrest." "For sitting on my porch?" Darius asked, for failure to comply. "Officer," Darius said, keeping his hands high, "I am a federal agent. My credentials are in the safe inside the house. If you fire that weapon, you will be assaulting a federal officer." Stryker hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. The words "federal agent" hung in the air like a guillotine blade. But then, Stryker's ego took back the wheel. He looked at Darius' sweatpants, t-shirt, barefoot. He didn't look like the Fed Stryker saw on TV. He didn't look like the suits from D.C. He looked like a guy trying to bluff his way out of a ride to the station. "Yeah, right," Stryker scoffed. "And I'm the director of the CIA. Get on the damn ground." Stryker holstered the taser and lunged. It was sloppy. Stryker grabbed Darius's left wrist, twisting it violently behind his back. Darius, trained in Krav Maga and close-quarters combat, had to override every instinct in his body that screamed to disarm the man. He could have broken Stryker's wrist, swept his leg, and had him pinned in 3 seconds. But Darius knew the game. If he fought back, even in self-defense, the narrative would change. "Violent suspect attacks, officer." The headline would bury the truth. To win this, Darius had to lose the physical fight. He had to be the perfect victim. "I am not resisting," Darius repeated loudly as Stryker shoved him face first against the siding of his own house. The rough stucco scratched his cheek. "Stop fighting," Stryker yelled, panting, though Darius was standing perfectly still. It was a tactic cops use to justify force on the recording. "Stop reaching." "My hands are visible," Darius said through gritted teeth as the handcuffs were slapped onto his wrists. The metal bit into his skin. Stryker ratcheted them tight, too tight. Stryker yanked Darius away from the wall and spun him around. He grabbed Darius by the back of the neck, marching him down the porch steps. "You want to play games?" Stryker hissed in his ear. "We'll see how much of a Fed you are when we run your prints and you pop for warrants." As they reached the bottom of the driveway, the audience had grown. Mrs. Higgins was still filming, but now Mr. Henderson from next door, a retired tax attorney, was out too. "Officer," Henderson shouted from his lawn. "Officer, that's Darius. He lives there. What are you doing?" Stryker ignored him. He shoved Darius toward the cruiser. He opened the back door and pushed Darius's head down, forcing him into the cramped, plastic back seat. The smell of old vomit and disinfectant hit Darius instantly. Stryker slammed the door. Darius sat in the back, his shoulders aching from the angle of his arms. He took a deep breath. He needed to remain calm. He needed to think like an agent. Through the plexiglass divider, he watched Stryker get into the front seat. The officer was breathing hard, the adrenaline dump making his hands shake. He grabbed the radio handset. "Dispatch, Unit 4 Alpha," Stryker said. His voice clipped. "1 in custody, 10 to 15. Resisting. Failure to ID. Copy 4-Alpha." The dispatcher's voice crackled. "Subject info. Refuse to identify," Stryker said, glancing in the rearview mirror at Darius. "John Doe for now. Transporting to station." Darius leaned forward, as much as the cuffs allowed. "Officer Stryker," he said clearly. "You need to call a supervisor. Now." Stryker turned around, the mesh cage separating them. "I don't need to do anything but book you. Pal, you can tell your story to the judge. My badge number is 8944-Bravo, Darius said. "Special agent in charge, Counter-Terrorism Division, Washington Field Office. If you leave this driveway with me in this car without verifying that, you are committing a felony kidnapping." Stryker paused. The specificity of the number, the rank, it was too detailed for a random lie. A seed of doubt finally began to sprout in the fertile soil of his ignorance. But Stryker was too deep now. If he uncuffed him, he admitted he was wrong. If he admitted he was wrong, he looked weak. "Shut up," Stryker muttered. He put the car in drive. "If you move this car," Darius said, his voice dropping to that lethal calm again, "you seal your fate. Check my wallet. It's in my back pocket. My PIV card is in there." Stryker stared at him through the cage. The engine idled. The neighbors were now gathering at the end of the driveway. Phones out. A gallery of witnesses. Stryker cursed under his breath. He put the car back in park. He got out, stormed around to the back door, and ripped it open. "Turn!" he barked. Darius rotated his hips. Stryker reached into Darius's back pocket, fishing out the slim leather wallet. He opened it. His thumb flicked past a credit card, a gym membership, and then stopped. There it was. The gold badge. The photo ID, United States Department of Justice. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Darius Miller, Special Agent in Charge. Stryker stared at the ID. The sun glared off the lamination. He looked at the photo Darius in a suit, unsmiling. He looked at the man in the back seat, Darius in a t-shirt, unsmiling. The blood drained from Stryker's face so fast it almost made him dizzy. He had arrested a SAC. He had assaulted a federal agent. He had done it on camera. He had done it in front of witnesses. Stryker looked up. Darius was watching him. "You have a choice right now." "Brad," Darius said, using the first name. "You can take those cuffs off, call your sergeant, and pray that I'm a forgiving man. Or you can take me to the station and see what happens when the FBI director calls your chief." Stryker's hand trembled. He looked at the badge again. He swallowed hard. But before he could make a decision, another siren wailed in the distance. Fast. Approaching. "I didn't call for backup," Stryker whispered. "No," Darius said. "But Mrs. Higgins probably called 911, and I'm guessing she told them a police officer was attacking her neighbor." A second cruiser screeched around the corner, followed closely by a black SUV with tinted windows. Stryker closed his eyes. The trap had snapped shut. The suburban quiet of Oak Creek had fully evaporated, replaced by the chaotic symphony of a police incident. The second cruiser, Unit 4, Charlie, skidded to a halt at a jagged angle behind Stryker's vehicle. The tires bit into the asphalt, leaving black streaks that would annoy the HOA for months. Out of the second car stepped Officer Maria Benitez. She was younger than Stryker, fresh out of her probationary period, with a ponytail pulled tight and eyes wide with confusion. She saw Stryker standing by the back door of his cruiser, looking like he'd just seen a ghost, and the growing crowd of neighbors on the sidewalk. "Brad," Benitez called out, her hand resting on her belt. "What's the situation?" dispatch said, "Officer in distress." Stryker looked at her, his face pale and sweaty. He looked back at the tinted window of his cruiser, where Darius Miller, federal agent, counterterrorism SAC, and the man currently wearing Stryker's handcuffs sat in silence. Stryker's mind was racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. "He's lying," Stryker told himself. "He has to be. The badge is fake. The ID is a novelty prop. People do that. Sovereign citizens do that. If he admitted he was wrong now, he was done. He'd be the laughing stock of the precinct. He'd be written up. But if he stuck to the script, suspect refused lawful order, resisted arrest, he might just survive. He just needed to book the guy. Once he was in the system, it was a lawyer's problem, not his. "Suspect is secured," Stryker yelled back to Benitez, his voice cracking slightly. "Male, uncooperative, refused to ID, resisted physically. We're transporting." "Do you need me to ride with you?" Benitez asked, walking closer. "No," Stryker shouted too quickly. "No, just keep the civilians back. Crowd control." He moved to get back into the driver's seat, desperate to leave the scene, desperate to get Darius into a holding cell where he could strip him of that badge and bury it in an evidence bag. But before he could open his door, the black SUV that had followed Benitez's cruiser didn't just pass by. It swerved, mounting the curb of Darius's front lawn, the perfect manicured grass Darius had been admiring 10 minutes ago, and slammed into park, effectively blocking Stryker's exit. Stryker froze. "Hey, what the hell?" The door of the SUV flew open. The man who stepped out wasn't wearing a uniform. He was wearing a charcoal grey suit that cost more than Stryker's car. He was tall, lean, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of haircut that screamed, "Washington, D.C." This was Special Agent Tom Holloway. He was Darius's number 2 at the field office. He had come by to drop off a secured laptop and a bottle of bourbon for Darius's decompression. Holloway didn't look at Stryker. He looked at the house. He looked at the empty porch with the iced tea still sweating on the table. Then he looked at the police cruiser. He saw the silhouette in the back. Holloway walked straight towards Stryker, ignoring Benitez, who was shouting, "Sir, step back! This is a police scene!" "Officer," Holloway said, his voice carrying a terrifyingly polite edge, "I'm looking for the owner of this home, Darius Miller." Stryker puffed his chest out, trying to regain control. "Sir, you need to back away. We are conducting an arrest." "An arrest?" Holloway stopped 3 feet from Stryker. He looked at the cruiser again. He squinted, through the tint. He recognized the profile. He saw the way the man was sitting upright, dignified. Despite being caged, Holloway's face went from polite to granite in a heartbeat. "Who do you have in that car?" Officer Holloway asked. "John Doe," Stryker spat. "Refusal to identify. Trespassing." "Trespassing," Holloway repeated. He looked at the house. On his own property? He couldn't prove it was his property, Stryker argued, his confidence crumbling, but his mouth still moving. He refused to show ID. He got belligerent. "Belligerent," Holloway said. "Open the door." "Excuse me. Open the door." Holloway reached into his jacket. Stryker's hand instinctively went to his gun. "Don't reach hands where I can see them." Benitez drew her weapon, aiming it low. "Sir, hands." Holloway didn't flinch. He moved slowly, deliberately. He pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up. The gold shield caught the afternoon sun. FBI. "Special Agent Thomas Holloway," he announced. "Now, officer, unless you want to explain to the Department of Justice why you are pointing a firearm at a federal agent, you will holster that weapon and open that car door." Stryker's world tilted. Benitez gasped and immediately holstered her gun. "Oh, shit," she whispered. Stryker didn't move. He couldn't. He was paralyzed by the realization that the fake badge in Darius's pocket was very, very real. I didn't know," Stryker stammered. He didn't say." "Open it," Holloway commanded. Stryker turned, his hands shaking so bad he dropped his keys. He picked them up, fumbling, and unlocked the back door of the cruiser. He pulled it open. Darius Miller looked up. He hadn't broken a sweat. "Tom," Darius said casually, "you're early. I thought we said 5 o'clock. "Traffic was light," Holloway said, leaning down to look at his boss. He looked at the handcuffs. His jaw tightened. "You okay, boss?" "I'm fine," Darius said. "Officer Stryker here was just giving me a tour of the back seat. He was very thorough, especially with the tactile inspection of my rotator cuffs." Holloway turned to Stryker. The look he gave him could have peeled paint off a wall. "You handcuffed a special agent in charge on his own front porch?" Holloway asked softly. "He refused to ID. Stryker shouted, the panic fully taking over now. He wouldn't show me his license. I have the right to investigate. You have the right to investigate a crime, Darius said from the back seat. Sitting while black isn't a crime. Brad. At that moment, a third siren wailed. A heavier, deeper siren. An SUV marked Oak Creek Police. Watch Commander roared up the street. That, Darius said, nodding toward the approaching vehicle, would be your boss. I suggest you start thinking about your pension, officer, assuming you still have one by dinner time. Sergeant Grady was a man who just wanted to make it to retirement without a lawsuit. He was 55, tired, and had a bad knee. When the call came in from Mrs. Higgins, who had bypassed 911 and called the precinct's direct line, screaming that Stryker is beating up the nice man from 404, Grady knew his day was ruined. He pulled up to the scene and saw the circus. 2 cruisers, a civilian SUV parked on the lawn, neighbors recording with phones, and Stryker looking like he was about to vomit. Grady hauled himself out of his SUV. He adjusted his belt and marched towards the group. What is going on here? Grady bellowed. Stryker practically ran to him. Sarge, listen, I got a suspect. Refused ID. Resisted arrest. Now this guy, he pointed at Holloway, claims he's FBI and is obstructing my transport. Grady looked at Holloway. He saw the suit. He saw the badge hanging from Holloway's neck chain. Now. I'm not obstructing, Sergeant, Holloway said calmly. I'm preventing a kidnapping. Kidnapping? Grady frowned. Who's in the car? The homeowner, Holloway said. And my boss, SAC, Darius Miller. Grady stopped chewing his gum. He looked at Stryker. Stryker, did you arrest a homeowner on his own porch? He wouldn't show ID. Stryker insisted, his voice high and whine-like. He fit the description of the break-in suspect. What description? Grady asked. The break-in was a white male, 5'8", wearing a hoodie. Who is in the car? Stryker went silent. Grady walked past him to the open door of the cruiser. He looked in. He saw Darius. Darius Miller looked like a man who commanded rooms, even in a t-shirt, even in cuffs. He had authority radiating off him. Sergeant, Darius said. I'm Darius Miller. I live here. My credentials are in my back pocket, which Officer Stryker has already verified. Yet he continues to detain me. Grady looked at Stryker. You verified his ID. I checked his wallet after I cuffed him. Stryker admitted. But it looked fake, and he was already under arrest for resisting. Uncuff him, Grady said. It wasn't a suggestion. Sarge, if we let him go, we admit liability, Stryker whispered, trying to conspire with his superior. We book him. Drop the charges later. Standard procedure. Grady looked at Stryker with pure disgust. You idiot. You didn't just step in it. You drowned in it. Uncuff him. Now. Stryker swallowed hard. He reached into his belt for the key. He leaned into the car. Turn around, Stryker muttered to Darius. Darius turned. The key clicked. The ratchets released. Darius pulled his arms free. He rubbed his wrists, where deep red indentations were already forming. He stepped out of the cruiser. He stood up to his full height, 6'2". He stretched his neck. Then he turned to Stryker. Officer Stryker, Darius said. His voice was no longer conversational. It was the voice he used for interrogating terrorists. You are going to do 3 things right now. Stryker stood there, stripped of his power, looking small. 1, Darius said, holding up a finger. You are going to mute your body camera. Do not turn it off. Just mute it. I want the video running. Stryker looked at Grady. Grady nodded. Do it. Stryker tapped the button on his chest. 2. Darius continued. You are going to hand your service weapon to Sergeant Grady. You are currently a subject in a federal civil rights investigation, and I do not feel safe with you armed. You can't do that, Stryker said. I'm an officer of the law. Not for long, Darius said. Sergeant. Grady didn't hesitate. Stryker, gun, badge, now. Sarge, give it to me. Brad! Grady barked. Before I arrest you for insubordination. Trembling, Stryker unholstered his Glock. He handed it, butt first, to Grady. Then he unclipped his badge, the shield he used to bully the neighborhood, and handed it over. And 3, Darius said, stepping closer, invading Stryker's personal space. You are going to apologize to my neighbors for disturbing the peace. Stryker looked at the crowd. Mrs. Higgins was there. Mr. Henderson, the kids from down the street. They were all watching. Stryker choked. Loudly. Darius said. I apologize. Stryker yelled at the sidewalk, his face burning with humiliation. Darius nodded. He turned to Holloway. Tom, get the camera from Mrs. Higgins. She recorded the whole thing. I want a copy before it hits the news. Though, he glanced at a teenager live streaming on TikTok nearby. I think we might be too late for that. Darius turned back to Grady. Sergeant, I want to file a formal complaint. Assault, battery, false imprisonment, and deprivation of rights under color of law. Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 242. We'll take the statement at the station. Mr. Miller, Grady said respectfully. Agent Miller. Darius corrected. And no, we won't be doing it at your station. We'll be doing it at the FBI field office. I'm calling the special agent in charge of the Internal Investigations Division. They'll be here in 20 minutes. Stryker leaned against his cruiser, looking like he was going to faint. Am I under arrest? Stryker whispered. Darius looked at him. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not yet. Brad, tonight, you go home. You sit on your porch. You think about what you did. You wait for the phone to ring. And believe me, it's going to ring. Darius turned to Holloway. Give me my tea. Tom, I'm parched. Holloway handed him the glass from the porch table. The ice had melted, but Darius drank it anyway, staring Stryker down over the rim of the glass. The karma wasn't just hitting back. It was winding up for a knockout punch. By the time Brad Stryker sat on the metal bench in the Oak Creek precinct locker room, his life had effectively ended. He just hadn't read the obituary yet. It had been 45 minutes since Sergeant Grady had confiscated his weapon and badge. 45 minutes since he had been ordered to return to the station in silence. The drive back had been a funeral procession of one. No radio, no siren, just the crushing weight of silence and the terrifying replay of Darius Miller's voice. Title 18, Section 242. Stryker stared at his boots. The same boots he had used to intimidate civilians for 6 years. Now, they just felt heavy. The locker room door banged open. It wasn't his partner. It wasn't a buddy coming to tell him it would blow over. It was Chief of Police, Harrison Ford, no relation, a sour-faced man who hated lawsuits more than he hated crime. Behind him trailed 2 men in suits who looked like they were carved out of granite. Stryker, Chief Ford barked. He didn't use a rank. Stryker flinched. Stand up! Stryker stood, his knees popping. Chief, let me explain. You don't speak. Ford cut him off. his face a mask of controlled fury. "You listen. Do you know what just landed on my desk? A call from the assistant director of the FBI in Washington. Do you know what he asked me? He asked me why one of my officers was assaulting a high-ranking counter-terrorism official on federal leave." Stryker opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "And that's not the worst part," Ford continued, stepping aside to let the two suits forward. "The worst part is that Mrs. Higgins, God bless her nosy soul, knows how to use Twitter." Ford pulled a tablet from under his arm and shoved it in Stryker's face. The video was already playing. It had 4.2 million views. The title was simple: "Brutal and catchy racist cop attacks. FBI agent at home. Watch karma hit." The video showed everything: the aggressive approach, the refusal to look at the ID, the drawing of the taser on a man holding iced tea, the tackle, and then the glorious, high-definition zoom-in on Stryker's face when Holloway flashed the gold badge. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. "Fire him immediately. This is why we kneel. I know this guy. He gave me a ticket for walking my dog last year. Total power tripper. Wait till the feds get him. He's cooked." Stryker felt the bile rise in his throat. I followed protocol. "Chief." He refused to identify. "Protocol." One of the suits spoke up. He was older, with silver hair and a scar running through his eyebrow. This was Special Agent Roger Sterling from the Civil Rights Division. "Protocol dictates that you have reasonable suspicion of a crime before detaining a citizen. Sitting on a porch is not a crime. Mr. Stryker." "I had reports of break-ins." Stryker pleaded, desperate now. He fit the description. "We pulled the dispatch logs," Sterling said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The last break-in report was 3 weeks ago. Suspect was a white male, 5'9". Darius Miller is black, 6'2". Unless you are legally blind, that is not a mistake. That is profiling." Sterling stepped closer, invading Stryker's space, just as Stryker had done to Darius. "I am Special Agent Sterling. I am serving you with a federal warrant for the seizure of your personal electronic devices, your locker contents, and your vehicle." Sterling held out a paper. "We are opening an investigation into deprivation of rights under color of law. It carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in federal prison, if bodily injury resulted, and Mr. Miller has a contusion on his wrist that sentence can be enhanced." Stryker stared at the paper. Federal prison. Not the county jail where he knew the guards. Federal prison. With the people he put there. Am I fired?" Stryker whispered, looking at the chief. Chief Ford looked at him with zero sympathy. "You're on administrative leave pending the investigation, unpaid, effective immediately. Turn in your keys." Stryker fumbled for his cruiser keys. He placed them in the chief's hand. "And Brad," Ford added, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't bother calling the union rep. They saw the video. They aren't touching this. You're radioactive." Stryker walked out of the precinct into the late afternoon sun. He expected it to be over. But it was just beginning. Outside the station, 3 news vans were already setting up satellite dishes. A reporter from Channel 5 saw him exit the side door. "Officer Stryker, Officer Stryker. Do you have a comment on the assault of Agent Miller?" Stryker pulled his hood up and ran to his personal vehicle, a lifted pickup truck. He fumbled with his phone to call his wife. "Lisa." He looked at the screen. 56 missed calls, 112 text messages. The first text was from his wife, Brad. "Why are news trucks outside our house? Why is my sister calling me asking if you're a racist. What did you do?" Stryker dropped the phone. He started the truck, the engine roaring. He needed to get home. He needed to explain. But as he pulled out of the lot, he saw a black sedan pull out behind him, then another, then a third. The FBI wasn't just investigating him. They were hunting him. They were going to tear his life apart, brick by brick, to see what other roaches were hiding in the walls of his career. The dismantling of Brad Stryker took exactly 48 hours. Darius Miller sat in his living room, the same room Stryker had dragged him out of 2 days prior. His wrist was wrapped in an ACE bandage. Across from him sat his attorney, a shark named Eleanor Rigby, yes, she hated the jokes, and Special Agent Holloway. "The Bureau is moving fast," Holloway said, scrolling through a laptop. "They raided Stryker's cloud accounts this morning. Find anything?" Darius asked, sipping a fresh glass of tea. "Does a bear sit in the woods?" Holloway smirked. "It's a gold mine, Darius, and it's ugly." Holloway turned the laptop around. "Stryker wasn't just a bad apple," Holloway explained. "He was a rotten orchard. We found a private group chat with 3 other officers from neighboring precincts. They called it the Wolf Pack." Darius leaned in. The chat logs were displayed on the screen. They were vile. Jokes about excessive force. Photos of suspects they had tuned up in booking cells. And then a message from Stryker dated 2 weeks ago. Stryker new guy moved into the big colonial on Oak Creek. One of them drives an Audi, probably drug money. Gonna shake him down soon. See if he cracks. Darius read the message twice. A cold fury settled in his chest. "He premeditated it," Darius said softly. "It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment suspicion. He targeted me. He targeted you because of your race and your assets," Eleanor Rigby said, clicking her pen. "This is no longer just a civil rights violation. Darius, this is a hate crime enhancement. We have him on intent." "What about the department?" Darius asked. "Oak Creek PD. "They're scrambling," Holloway said. "Chief Ford is trying to paint Stryker as a rogue element. But we found emails where Stryker had 5 previous excessive force complaints against minorities. Ford signed off on all of them as unfounded." "We're going to indict the chief for negligence and cover-up too." Darius nodded. "Good. Burn it all down." Meanwhile, across town, Brad Stryker was sitting in his kitchen in the dark. The blinds were drawn. Lisa had taken the kids to her mother's house in Ohio. She couldn't handle the death threats. People had found their address within an hour of the video going viral. Someone had thrown a brick through the front window last night. It had a note wrapped around it. "Get out!" Stryker was drinking cheap whiskey straight from the bottle. The TV was on, muted. His face was on every channel: CNN, Fox, MSNBC. They all agreed on one thing. Brad Stryker was the face of bad policing. His phone buzzed. It was a number he didn't recognize. He answered it. "Hello? Mr. Stryker." The voice was smooth, oily. "This is Marcus Thorne, attorney at law. I represent the Fraternal Order of Police Legal Defense Fund." Stryker sat up, a glimmer of hope sparking in his chest. Yes. Thank God. "Are you guys going to represent me? I need a lawyer. They're talking about federal charges." "Mr. Stryker, please listen," Thorne interrupted. "I'm calling to inform you that your membership with the FOP has been revoked, effective immediately, under the Conduct Unbecoming clause of our bylaws." The hope died, replaced by a cold vacuum. Revoked, I paid my dues for 10 years, and you violated the oath, Thorne said coldly. We defend officers who make mistakes in the line of duty. We do not defend officers who target federal agents based on racial prejudice and brag about it in group chats. The FBI sent us the transcripts. Brad, you're toxic. If I were you, I'd look for a public defender. You're going to need one. The line clicked dead. Stryker dropped the phone. He was alone. No union, no wife, no job, no money. Then, a heavy pounding on the door shook the house. Brad Stryker, federal agents, opened the door. Stryker looked at the whiskey bottle. He looked at the door. He stood up, his legs shaking. He walked to the door and opened it. The front lawn was filled with windbreakers. FBI, FBI, FBI. Standing in front was Special Agent Sterling, and next to him, wearing a sling but looking like a king, was Darius Miller. Darius didn't have to be there, but he wanted to be. He wanted Stryker to see him one last time. Brad Stryker, Sterling announced, his voice booming for the neighbors to hear. You are under arrest for violation of Title 18, United States Code, Sections 241 and 242, conspiracy against rights and deprivation of rights under color of law. Stryker held out his hands. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He was a shell. As Sterling slapped the cuffs on him, metal on bone, just like he had done to Darius, Stryker looked up at the man on the porch. I didn't know who you were, Stryker whispered, tears finally leaking from his eyes. Darius stepped down from the path, walking right up to Stryker. He leaned in close. That's the point, Brad, Darius said, his voice low and hard. You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me like a human being. The badge didn't make me worthy of respect. My humanity did. You forgot that. Darius signaled to Sterling. Take him! 2 agents grabbed Stryker by the arms and marched him toward the waiting SUV. The neighbors, the same ones Stryker had sworn to protect, stood on their lawns, watching in silence. No one waved. No one offered to help. Mrs. Higgins stood on her porch, holding her phone. She wasn't recording this time. She was just watching. As Stryker passed, she caught his eye. She shook her head slowly, disappointment etched in her face. Stryker was shoved into the back of the federal vehicle. The door slammed shut. It was a heavy, final sound, like the closing of a coffin. As the convoy drove away, Darius Miller stood on the sidewalk of the neighbor's house. Holloway walked up beside him. You okay, boss? Holloway asked. I will be, Darius said. But we're not done. Tom, Stryker was the symptom. Now we go after the chief. And then we go after the training academy that passed him. That's a lot of paperwork, Holloway noted. Darius smiled. A real smile this time. I'm on leave. Tom, I've got nothing but time. 13 months later, the federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia, felt more like a tomb than a hall of justice. The marble floors echoed with the whispers of reporters. But inside courtroom 4B, the silence was absolute. Brad Stryker sat at the defense table. He was unrecognizable. The pumped-up, arrogant officer who had terrorized Oak Creek was gone. In his place sat a man who had lost 30 pounds, his hair thinning, wearing a suit that hung loosely on his frame. He looked small. He looked defeated. Opposite him, in the gallery's front row, sat Darius Miller. Darius wore his charcoal suit, his FBI lapel pin catching the harsh fluorescent light. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't gloating. He was simply witnessing. Beside him sat Sarah, his wife, her hand resting firmly over his. The past year had been a scorched earth campaign. The Wolfpack group chat had led to the indictment of 3 other officers. Chief Harrison Ford had been forced into early retirement to avoid negligence charges, and the Oak Creek Police Department was now operating under a federally mandated consent decree. The rot had been cut out, but the scars remained. Judge Arthur C. Wright, a man known for his zero-tolerance policy on public corruption, adjusted his glasses and looked down at Stryker. "Mr. Stryker," Judge Wright said, his voice gravelly, "you have pleaded guilty to 1 count of deprivation of rights under color of law and 1 count of making false statements to federal investigators. Do you have anything to say before I pass sentence?" Stryker stood up. His hands shook as he gripped the table. He didn't turn to look at Darius. "He couldn't, Your Honor," Stryker rasped, his voice breaking. I lost everything. My job. My wife left me. I haven't seen my kids in 6 months. I know I made a mistake. I let my biases cloud my judgment. I am sorry. I just want to go home." It was a pitiful display. A man who had once demanded total submission was now begging for mercy. Judge Wright let the silence hang for a moment. He picked up a piece of paper, the victim impact statement Darius had submitted. "Mr. Stryker," the judge began, removing his glasses, "you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to target a man sitting on his own porch because you decided he didn't belong there. You chose to ignore his calm demeanor. You chose to escalate violence when peace was offered." The judge leaned forward. "You mentioned that you lost your job and your family. That is tragic. But Mr. Miller could have lost his life if he had flinched, if he had reached for his phone too quickly. You might have killed him, and we would be here for a murder trial, with you claiming you feared for your safety." Stryker looked down, tears dripping onto the mahogany table. "The badge you wore," Judge Wright continued, his voice rising, "is a symbol of public trust. You used it as a weapon of personal prejudice. When law enforcement officers break the law, they do not just commit a crime. They murder the public's faith in justice." The judge picked up his gavel. "Brad Stryker, I sentence you to 96 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are remanded to the custody of the U.S. Marshals immediately." Crack. The sound of the gavel was like a gunshot. Stryker's knees buckled. His attorney caught him by the elbow. The U.S. Marshals moved in, their movements efficient and cold. They pulled Stryker's arms behind his back. Click, click. The same sound Stryker had inflicted on Darius. Handcuffs. As they marched him out, Stryker finally looked at the gallery. He locked eyes with Darius. There was no hate in Darius's eyes anymore, only pity. "I'm sorry," Stryker mouthed. Darius nodded once, acknowledged, but not absolved. As the heavy oak doors closed behind the prisoner, Sarah squeezed Darius's hand. "It's over, baby." Darius let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a year. "Yeah, it's over." They walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The press was there, a sea of microphones and cameras. Agent Miller, do you feel justice was served?" "Agent Miller, what message does this send to police officers?" Darius stopped. He adjusted his tie. He stepped up to the bank of microphones. "Justice isn't a verdict," Darius said, his voice steady and projecting to the back of the crowd. "Justice is the day when a man can sit on his porch in any neighborhood, regardless of the color of his skin, and not have to worry about a badge coming up the driveway to question his existence." He looked directly into the camera lens, speaking to every officer, every citizen, and every Brad Stryker watching at home. The badge is a shield, not a sword. If you can't tell the difference, you don't deserve to wear it. Darius turned and walked away. Sarah by his side. They didn't look back. That evening, the sun was setting over Oak Creek. The golden hour returned, painting the white picket fences in amber light. Darius sat on his porch. The wicker chair creaked comfortably. He had a glass of iced tea on the table. A patrol car drove by. It was a new officer, a young woman Darius didn't recognize. She slowed down as she passed the house. Darius tensed. Just for a second. The trauma was fading, but the muscle memory was deep. The officer rolled down her window. She looked at Darius. She smiled and gave a respectful wave. "Good evening, Mr. Miller," she called out. Darius looked at her. He saw the genuine respect in her eyes. The fear was gone. The balance had shifted. He lifted his glass. "Good evening, officer." The cruiser rolled on, patrolling the neighborhood, keeping the peace instead of disturbing it. Darius took a sip of his tea. It tasted sweet. He closed his eyes and listened to the wind in the oak trees. He was home, he was safe, and for the first time in a long time, he was just a man on his porch. Brad Stryker thought he was the law, but he forgot that no one is above it. His arrogance cost him his freedom, his family, and his name, proving that the most dangerous thing a corrupt officer can encounter isn't a criminal. It's a citizen who knows their rights and has the power to enforce them. Darius Miller didn't just win a court case. He dismantled a system of bullying that had plagued his community for years. If this story got your blood boiling and you believe that justice was finally served, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see it. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story where the karma hits back harder than the crime. Let us know in the comments, do you think 8 years was enough for Stryker? Or did he deserve more? I'll be reading your replies. Stay safe and know your rights.